on. I have a question for you. What do you think about homework? What's the point?
I think for math specifically, it's good to reinforce concepts.
Formatted way of studying.
Like go over and practice what you did in school that day.
So in science, I use it a lot as pre-work.
Like extra practice at home so you can get more acquainted with like the work that you're learning in class.
I think it's very useful when it's actually done and done intentionally.
I've had some mixed experiences by sending too much homework home.
Teachers assign too much and it's just busy work.
The more practice, the better.
Important to have homework. I think it actually benefits me a lot. It helps me learn.
But I think perfect practice makes perfect. So just giving homework isn't enough.
But sometimes teachers assign like a lot and it can be too much.
So the question is, what my perspective on homework?
Yeah.
Just ignite their interest in learning more. So I think it's really important that homework is designed in a way that helps students want to learn more.
With the prevalence of online school, it seems as though a lot of students are leaning towards just answering the question based on how the computer wants you to do it or how the program wants you to do it, instead of being able to fully integrate their learning and showing their work into the problem and the homework at hand.
There's no point.
Yeah, I think homework's very, very important.
And it's stupid, it's a waste of time, and I don't like it at all.
I think that homework doesn't actually help you if it doesn't ask you to show your work.
In some cases, homework is pretty important, like for classes like math or language, where there's a lot of memorization involved.
Do your kids ever get homework that is not well designed?
Absolutely.
So, as you can see, homework is a clearly complex and debatable topic. So today we're going to be talking about the feedback, format, and frequency of homework from failing to flying, and give you 4 recommendations based on the research we have performed throughout the summer to help you construct purposeful and useful homework for your students and promote their highest achievement. So, as I said, and as you recognize probably from our video, homework is a long-standing controversial topic. There are many different opinions and debates that currently go on about homework's usefulness and its purpose. And this is due to the fact that there are many nuanced variables at play that can impact whether or not it's effective for students. So when should homework be assigned? How often should it be assigned? What the actual content of the homework should be? Whether parents should be involved? There are many, many different things that impact homework and its usefulness. So that's what made it such an interesting and complex topic for us to study. So with that being said, we had some initial thoughts about what homework should be and kind of dove into the research there. So we hypothesized that a small amount of homework given nightly with immediate feedback and high support from families would promote the most student achievement.
Thank you, Kate, for that lovely intro and framing of our topic. So I'll kick it off with our first recommendation, which is to provide feedback on homework. There are some stipulations with this. Obviously, it's a little more complicated than that, but we'll get into that with some support from the literature. So feedback in the classroom in a number of different contexts, behaviorally, academically, anything you can think of, how you respond to your students is one of the most powerful influences on learning and achievement. So this feedback and its importance is obviously going to transfer to homework as well. That is a feature of the classroom. So in studies done, it is found that any feedback on homework, so in any form that you give it to them, that can be, just telling them what the correct answer is to problems that they're getting wrong, telling them to try again because they got it incorrect, or giving them a big explanation on what they did incorrect. Any feedback on homework is beneficial for low-performing students. It has been found in some studies that giving them the correct answer may be more beneficial than feedback without it, but in general, you should be aiming to provide feedback to your low-performing students. And then finally, another advantage to feedback that is given immediately is that you are able to save time reviewing material in class. Because if you're waiting until all the students do their homework, go over it the next day in class, there's going to be different issues for different students, whereas if there's a way for them to get the feedback immediately, they can see where they went wrong and focus on fixing that, as opposed to maybe checking out in class if you're going over problems 1, 3, and 5, and someone got those ones wrong but got 2, 4, and 6 incorrect. Giving them feedback immediately makes it more differentiated and allows students to hone in on what they need help with the most. So, how can we take this and apply it to our classroom or our school? Number one, use pre-assessment to differentiate homework. So, this is important because for low performers, it is beneficial for them to get feedback in any form, like we talked about. However, for high performers, the effect of feedback is either neutral or sometimes can actually have a small negative effect. So there's different thoughts behind why this might be. One of them might be that they would benefit more from trying to work it out themselves as opposed to getting the answer given it to them because they already have that prior knowledge. But you need to constantly use pre-assessment because kids are going to have different prior knowledge on different topics. So trying to pre-assess before every unit to see where kids are at and think about how I can differentiate between my high performers and low performers and give them differing feedback could be very useful. Number two, if possible, use online homework that provides immediate feedback. Because, like we talked about, if you can get them the immediate feedback on what they're getting incorrect, that can be very valuable and save you class time. And number three, and this can be beneficial whether you're providing immediate feedback or not, giving students worked examples, so with all the steps available to them that they can look at and go back and work with, or if they're working on a worksheet, they can go to a Google Classroom or maybe you print it out for them and see how the problems are done. That's a form of feedback. But also, even if it is online, just seeing it in your handwriting might jog their memory from what was happening in class. Going through the steps might bring something up that they miss or remember from class. So providing worked examples for students to study and then explain where they were going wrong can be very, very valuable to them as well. So that's what we have for recommendation one. You want to provide feedback. You can do it for all of your students, but focusing in on the low performers is where it's going to have the biggest effect. Thank you.
So our second recommendation in this practice guide is a little bit different in terms of thinking about the purpose of homework. But one of our recommendation is that we say you should use homework to try to reduce stereotypes and increase students' relationship with the content. Now, this recommendation doesn't have a whole lot to do with specific mastery of the content itself, but it's going to have other benefits, which we're going to get into in just a second. So from the literature, research tells us that if students can identify with STEM, and this is particularly a science example, but this could apply to other content areas too. If students can identify with STEM, they're more likely to be successful in STEM. But the problem with that is that most students come into STEM courses, and again, I'm sure this is applicable to other content areas too. They have certain stereotypes of the people within STEM. So who does science? What are these kind of people like? More importantly, are these people who do STEM, are they anything like me? So if we can change these stereotypes and change who students view scientists or anyone in the content areas, who they view them as, then we can help students identify with the people behind the content, which will hopefully increase their success in the course, and it might even increase their interest. So again, these are all science examples, but this can apply to other content areas as well. Some of the benefits we see: an increased motivation in students for STEM in particular. There's more interest in science. Obviously, they get a more complete picture of who scientists or all these content people get a more complete picture of who they are, so we can decrease their stereotypes. And it also will help them, it makes them more likely to pursue a STEM career. Now, it's not necessarily saying that students will pursue a STEM career, but for the students who want to pursue STEM or any other career, if they have these problems, but they see they can't, if they don't think they can become scientists, then this will help them realize that yes, they actually can become a scientist and they can do science. So the steps to implement are pretty simple. what you want to start off with is you want to plan for just 3 to 4 of these content spotlight homework assignments per semester. It really doesn't need to be very many. In the research, the original landmark study, they only did 3 over the course of a whole semester, and it worked excellent to reduce stereotypes. Second step is for you as a teacher to identify people of your content area who represent students' experiences, whether that's their sociocultural experience, whether that's where they live, whether that's the size of their family. You want to try to break down these consistent stereotypes of who these people are, show students that they're kind of normal people, just like everybody else. The third step, you want to present the story of this person, but not usually how it's presented in courses. Usually in courses, the way these people are presented is they're presented in light of the content they contribute to the class. So for example, Sir Isaac Newton is often talked about in science classes, but he's only talked about insofar as he introduced his laws of motion, but not about who Isaac Newton was behind the science. So you want to try to get to the person behind the science. You want to give them a short writing assignment, only has to be a couple of questions. Have them try to think deeply about who these people are and what that tells us about the kind of people who do their work. And then debrief for the students during class quickly to help them hear other perspectives about. So one example, which you can see from science particularly, is this example of the scientist Aaliyah Eddington, who might be more, or it might be easier for some of your students to identify with the scientist in particular. And you can see on the left of the screen, there's a little blurb about who she is, about her research, but also about kind of what she's doing in life. There's an interview that was also included on a separate page, and there was some real research that actually uses some of those tier 3 vocabulary words, some of those good science content. So it's not trying to water down the science at all, but it still shows who she is as a person besides the scientist. And the written assignment here, it's really open. It says all the students have to do is write a reflection. These are some guiding questions. They don't necessarily need to answer these questions, but these questions can help them kind of think deeply about the kind of people who do science. Now, this next part is not necessarily in line with any research, but it's my personal reflection about another reason we should do this, which is related to our faith. And I think as Catholic educators, we can challenge ourselves because somebody who does this in our faith is Mary. And you may be familiar with Our Lady of Louvain, who appeared to some people in Vietnam, or Our Lady of Kibeho, who appeared to some people in Africa, Our Lady of Guadalupe, who appeared to Juan Diego in Mexico, Our Lady of Fatima, who appeared to the 3 shepherd children in Portugal, and Our Lady of Knock, who appeared to some people in Ireland. Now, whenever Mary goes to visit people, she appears to them as someone as part of their culture. Whenever she appears in these ways, the devotion to Mary always increases, and there's lots of conversions anywhere. So in some ways, it's almost like Mary herself is trying to reduce her own stereotypes with the people she's visiting. So if Mary is trying to reduce her own stereotypes, shouldn't we as Catholic educators do the same in our content areas?
Our third recommendation is to assign small, regular doses of high-quality homework assignments. This is a quality over quantity approach to homework, where quality is goal-directed assignments that are significantly challenging to students, and quantity is amount of homework assigned per night. Let's get into the research. So first, let's talk about quantity. In our research, we have not found a significant relationship between time on homework and achievement. And so what we're seeing is that it doesn't necessarily matter how much homework is assigned per night. In fact, for some students, time on homework was negatively associated with achievement, potentially pointing to lack of prior knowledge or study skills, making them take more time. We also found in the research that spaced and frequent practice leads to better student achievement. So let's look a little closer at that second part. In King and colleagues' study, it was found that spaced practice is better than massed practice for long-term retention of knowledge. So as you can see here, the difference between spaced and massed practice is this gap. So spaced practice may be the same amount of studying, but spaced out, as the word implies, over time. Massed practice is a large amount in a shorter time interval. So we want practice that's spaced, and we want frequent practice. And so in this study, you've got on the y-axis students' score on a mathematics test. X-axis is frequency of homework assignments. I want to draw your attention to where it says always here. Notice that students who had more frequent homework scored higher on their mathematics test. Now let's talk a little bit about homework quality. The research has pointed to the fact that well-chosen and challenging homework is important and helpful for student achievement. Similar to time spent on homework, some students lack prior knowledge, lack study skills, and need more scaffolding in these challenging homework assignments. And lastly, learning goals are also effective for improving the quality of homework and improving student motivation and perception of quality of homework. In Detmers and colleagues' study, we see that homework quality is related to homework motivation, homework behavior, and achievement, where quality is like we talked about, well chosen and challenging. Homework motivation is whether they will feel confident or they expect to feel confident, as well as whether they think it will be useful to do the homework. Homework behavior is if they do it, how much time they spend on it. And lastly, we see that relating to achievement. So it all starts over here at homework quality, improving motivation and behavior. For learning goals, Valle and colleagues found significant relationships indicated by these dotted lines here. So if we start at learning goals, helping students to set and connect their goals for growth and learning to the homework they're doing, significantly related to homework time management, amount of homework completed, and academic achievement. So learning goals are an effective tool to improve the quality of homework. How this applies to the classroom and school setting. Our first application, you should assign realistic and doable amounts of homework. This can be 10 to 15 minutes per subject, and a maximum of about an hour was found for the middle school ages to be sufficient. If you're on a teaching team, be sure to coordinate with that team so you do not go above that. Homework assigned daily or every other day is preferred to packets completed on students' own schedule, though packets are enticing because they offer students flexibility. It potentially enables procrastination-prone students to complete a large amount in one night, which defeats the purpose of spacing regular practice for long-term memory. Third recommendation is to give homework for a reason so that students can connect what they're doing to explicitly stated learning goals. So we should not just be assigning homework for the sake of it. We should be thinking through how this connects to students' learning and communicating that to students to increase their motivation and perceived quality of homework. Lastly, we should avoid assigning homework that focuses on memorization and surface level engagement. We want deeper engagement. And so, for example, in math, rather than drills, assign an open middle problem, which is more complex. In ELA, rather than a baseline reading log, try assigning guiding questions or strategies of the week. And for science and social studies, that may mean assigning vocabulary practice that goes beyond memorization to having them make comparisons and connections between the words. These were our applications to the classroom and school for the recommendation that we should assign small and regular doses of high quality homework.
So our fourth recommendation was to assign homework that involves students' families in meaningful ways. One of the things we came across in our research was that there are both positive and negative effects of parents and families being involved in their students' homework process in sort of academic life outside of school. But something that was very evident in the research was that there are certain ways that do have positive impacts for student outcomes and student attitudes towards the content of their homework. And so parents being involved in this sort of academic socialization where they discuss current events related to the students' content, area, or goals and expectations revolving around academics can be really powerful in the student attitude toward content in school. And so we want to utilize involving families in a meaningful way that is direct and explicit. And so having teachers design homework that prompts students to involve their parents specifically in very specific ways. So a lot of studies had sort of similar formats, but one of the most prominent ones by Voris in 2003 from Johns Hopkins University designed this very explicit and direct homework called TIPS, where there are certain components that allow for students to directly involve their families in specific ways in their homework, sort of to avoid this sort of coaching or tutoring role that a parent may take on in the homework process, especially in the younger grades. So there's some specific elements that are important in this sort of homework, including a direct letter to the parent explaining the objective of the homework, an objective related to the content of the homework, and then explicit directions for the student to involve their parent or family member in sort of completing the content of this homework. And the goal here is for the teacher to design it in a way that students know how to explicitly involve their family member in the homework process, but also in a way that protects the family member from having to know any specific content or any specific skill when completing this homework. So really providing this sort of balance between involving the family in a meaningful way, but also making it so that they don't have to be the tutor or the coach or the teacher at home, but so that they are involved in their child's schooling process. And so in the most prominent study done on this type of homework, they completed surveys for students who were assigned this type of homework over an entire year and versus students who were not. And what they saw was the level of family involvement in that specific course went up. So students who were assigned the interactive homework had a higher percentage of family involvement in science compared to the group who was assigned regular homework. So based on that research, there are some sort of action points here when it comes to assigning sort of this meaningful homework that directly involves families in their students' schooling. So like I said before, the recommendation here is to design this sort of multi-component interactive homework that is connected to the content, but explicitly tells students how to have their families and parents be involved in that homework process to sort of combat this idea that the parent needs to be the tutor or the coach when it comes to completing homework. So involving them in a very specific way, and also the idea here is to not have to do this every night, but assigning it enough to where students are familiar with this process, but also have enough time to complete it. So the recommendation here is to either have the interactive homework be once a week to bi-monthly. So this also takes some of the stress off the teacher to have to come up with these multi-component, very thoughtful homework assignments, and also gives the student and families enough time to complete these assignments outside of the classroom. And this also opens the door for parent communication, right? Especially at the middle school level, this becomes more of a challenge as teachers have more students and less sort of direct parent contact. So this begins to sort of open the door for that communication between parents and teachers, which is super important in terms of their child's education. So with that, we hope that you were able to see some clear connections in our recommendations for making homework purposeful and useful for our students and improving their overall student achievement. So with that, we have some questions for discussion that we hope to address in our Q&A section. So we hope that was helpful, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.